Hello and welcome. You are listening to Lonely People, a podcast. I am Sen,
And I am Sari.
and this week's topic we're talking. I think we are currently in episode 3, if I'm correct, hopefully. And this week, we're talking about life after a friend breakup. Um, I think this is a topic that me and Sari have really experienced, both the immediate like blowing up of a friend breakup, and also the ones that kind of happen over the course of weeks to months to years. So we just want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. An amazing intro. Yeah. So friendship breakups can be traumatizing and they can affect the way you make relationships in the future and all that sort of thing. And it definitely has hugely affected me and my relationships.
Yeah,
Okay, we can go into personal stories, just like what we've experienced and how this has affected us, and maybe go from there.
yeah. So my story with the friend breakup was actually someone I considered a best friend. This is back when I was in high school. Um, this friend in particular, me and her had been friends since middle school, and like middle school, we established that we like one day she like asked me, she's like, "We're best friends, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." Just because like we were so close and so tight knit, and like we were in the same program together, and like we just kind of did like a lot of things together. Um, but unfortunately, this particular friend, this is a little bit of a touchy subject, so like trigger warnings for like cancer and death, like all those things. Um, but this particular friend, her mom had cancer, which was a really tumultuous time for her. And I knew that, and I tried to be there as much as possible for her. So like always doing check-in calls and just being like, hey, like where are you at? And like really just trying to sit with her throughout all of the tough times of that. Like all it's having your a family member, especially immediate family member like your mom get cancer is a really hard time, and like I understood that she's going through a lot. So I tried to be like, like the stable figure, the supportive figure, like trying to help her out as much as I could throughout that entire process. Um, until one day, I just got a text from her saying she didn't want to be my friend anymore, which sounds odd, but it was really traumatic for me. And like her explanation was that she just wanted to, like, at this point in time, like she started to make this other group of friends. And like I noticed she was starting to begin to drift away, and I was kind of, growing upset because I'm like, I thought we were best friends. Like I thought we were gonna like, like we're supporting each other throughout this process, or like I'm supporting you. But she's in this text message, she kind of explained, she's like, oh, I want to be with people who make me happy. Um, and like that like broke my heart like so much because I was like, I thought we were friends. Um, and over the course of like, I don't know, like we're still in the same programs. I still see her like every day. We're taking the same classes together. And like I had a hard time accepting this breakup kind of thing. Um, I it was really hard just to go from like being so close to someone to like just watching them drift away and like be happy with other people kind of thing. And what makes it kind of worse was it wasn't a clean break either. Um, since we were still in the same programs, we still kind of encountered each other, and like it switched over to a point where like this particular friend, she started to like one of the members of her friend group. And she would only reach out to me just so I can like give her validating information about like, oh, like, yeah, he definitely likes you. Like, yeah, he definitely likes you. So it'd either be like her reaching out so I can help her with homework stuff, or like to get validation that this guy likes her. And like that was it. And like I was just, like left in like the tumultuousness of like I thought we weren't friends anymore, but also like you're only reaching out to me if you need something. And like whenever I brought up to her, I was like, this hurts you, like this is hurting me, this relationship, this like breakup not being a breakup isn't real. Like you're just using me. She like one of my emotional like one of I don't know how to phrase it, like one of the ways of like amending things like is like food. I use like food as like a relief thing. And she would bake me cookies. And like she'd just bring them to school. So I sent her like this like long angry thing saying like I don't want to be friends anymore. Like this is kind of like ruining my like this is like ruining my emotional health. she would bring me cookies with apology note saying like, "Hey, I'm so sorry," and then like all would be forgiven. Because I guess she kind of figured out like if I bring some big cookies, it's like a band-aid on a bullet wound.
Mm.
Um, and unfortunately, this went on for the rest of our high school career. And like up through the point of us graduating, I was like this back and forth thing of like me being constantly hurt over and over again. Even like when like those group of friends, because they were a year above us, they graduated, she continued on with like other people as their friends as a replacement for me again. And I just kind of had to like accept it and move on with my life, and it hurt a lot. Um, but I think it was like past the point of us graduating, if I'm remembering correctly. And like I think once again I just like reached out to her and I was like, hey, like I don't want to continue this relationship. There's nothing that's gonna come from it. And like this is back in the time period when Snapchat was still a big deal. So like all she sent to me was the word streaks question mark. So like I sent her this like long paragraph thing explaining like I don't want to continue this friendship if this is gonna how it's gonna be. And all of her response was like, "You want to maintain a streak?" Streaks question mark. So I kept it up for a little bit. I don't know why. I feel like there was still a portion of me that was like hoping that there was something that can come from this relationship. And in the end, it didn't. I just eventually just kind of faded out, stopped sending streaks, have not been in contact with her. A few years ago, maybe a year or two ago, I don't remember what, we found out, we being me and my sister, we found out that she lives in the same area. She lives pretty close to my sister. So she like, reached out to my sister being like, oh, hey, like, we should hang out sometime kind of thing. And I think it's more along the lines because she might be a little bit lonelier because she's a little bit she's isolated from like our old friend groups and friends and all those people who she became friends with. As far as I know of, don't talk to her anymore. Um, but like to me, like I was like, I don't like I forgive you for what you went through because I understand like you're having a really tumultuous time. You're having a really bad time because like obviously your mom's going through cancer and her mom did eventually pass away from cancer. I should have said that as well. Um, but on the other hand, I was like, I don't want to go through the same mental trauma or abuse or however you want to put it of like only meeting your needs and you're not being there when like I needed you kind of thing. So I decided to like just completely put an end to that friendship. I have not spoken to her since then. And honestly, it's I won't put it lightly. It's one of, like going through a friend breakup is like one of the worst things I think you can go through. I think a relationship breakup might be a little bit easier in a sense. Because like I think when people make go into a relationship, the expectation that they might not last. Like there's like a thing of like, oh, people go through breakups all the time. But when you go into a friendship, there's so many friendships that like last for decades and years to come, and you go into a friendship hoping that it'll last as long as possible. At least that's how I approach them. So when you have like these friendships that end in such an unpleasant way, or like they like get dragged out, it's so hard to like accept and go through and like deal with all them. I feel like there's not enough articles talking about it. There's not that much support of how to even like approach um, that method and that experience. Um, and yeah, that's my my little distressing story of like my friend, like my biggest friend breakup.
Yeah. We can probably expound later on like, you know, what what that caused happening in your life in the future and stuff, because it's
Mhm.
really painful, but then it also affects the rest of your life and how you function. But yeah, I have multiple friend breakup stories, but I'll just do one for now. Um, I grew up in a tight-knit community with a lot of people who just were really loving and close. And because of that, I had just a really close group of friends, like a mixture of I don't know. Anyway, but people who I grew up with and I knew them all the time, and we would spend weekends together and stuff. And it was maybe a group of like 5 to 7 kids, and it was actually kind of amazing. Like I remember when I was like 10 or something, and watching movies where like the kids run around the neighborhood and ride their bikes, and they go get ice cream from their aunt's fridge or whatever. And I was like, I actually do all those things, and it's so fun. And I remember thinking like, I live like the movie life, and it was so cool. And I had all those friends, and it was wonderful. And it was all this stuff like, some of them are bullies and some of them are horrible and you hate them, but it's still a really intimate kind of relationship and it's still really wonderful. And so I really appreciated it. And then when I got a little older, stuff happened and people got mad at each other and there was an argument and everything like blew up. But that kind of happens, like if you're in a tight community, it's normal for people to get mad at each other and they don't talk for 2 months or whatever, and then eventually they get over it and they're friends again. So that happened once, and I lost touch with my friends because we were kids, and so if the grown-ups are not happy, then the kids who don't have cell phones can't do anything about it. So we just kind of lost touch for a little bit, and I was sad, but it was normal. I was just kind of waiting it out. And then it was like 6 months, and it still hadn't resolved itself. And then it was a year, and it still hadn't resolved itself. And now it's like I've gone a year without being in touch with people who I used to see every weekend. And it was really hard. Like for all the time up to then, I just was kind of like frustrated. But then when I realized like, oh, this isn't going back, like it's never coming back again, it was really traumatic. It was like the end of my world. And I had to completely restart and like relearn life with different people in a different setting. And then maybe because I had a lot of good friends outside of school, I didn't have a lot of good friends in school. So I was in a school where I didn't really have friends or like fit or belong to a community. And then my outside community was just gone, like all the way gone. I wasn't even like it wasn't possible to communicate with them because people didn't want us to. And it was equally traumatic. And it and then like you live in the same community. And so even though we weren't allowed to communicate or whatever and the grown-ups weren't having it, you still see them sometimes. You go to Publix and you see them or whatever. But it was awkward and we were strongly discouraged from communicating with each other. And so when I saw them, they didn't even notice me or like look at me or they intentionally looked away from me and didn't talk to me. And it was horrible. Like people who you grew up with who you've seen over and over again and you know everything about them and you're so intimate and they don't even see you there. It was very difficult. And then after a while I realized like a year passed, 2 years passed, 3 years passed. They have cell phones now. We all have cell phones. We're old enough to find each other on MySpace and connect back again. And I tried a little bit and they just blew me off. So not only like have I lost those relationships and I have to restart, but the truth is they never really cared. Like it didn't mean the same thing to them that it meant to me. They quickly recovered and made new friends. It was very difficult. So after that, it left me like real bitter. Whenever people were nice to me, I was always like, yeah, but in 5 years you won't care anyway, which is not a healthy mentality. I think it took me a solid year to like after the 6 months of I realized like, oh, we're not friends anymore. After that, it took me a solid year of just being like really depressed and deciding I don't want any friends ever. Before I realized like this is not a way to live. And just I think my dad gave me advice and he said something like, you're going to be depressed, but if you ever want to live well, you have to decide you want to do that because it has to be your choice. You have to decide that. And then once you decide that, you'll find small ways to take steps and eventually move in a more healthy direction. And so that was actually quite accurate. At some point, I realized like I can't live like this, and I decided that I had to do something else. And then I took small steps, and it took me a long time, years and years, to develop a friendship, a friend group again, and like have a community. But that was the starting point, at least.
Yeah. And I think this would be a good time to like kind of segue into like the long-term impacts of those breakups. Because for me, I it not like in the immediate moment it started to reflect on my other friendships with other people because I think once you go through that breakup, you realize that it's not like you kind of saying like you when you go into a friendship, at least for me, like I think it's gonna last for like kind of forever. And then you realize that it's only temporary, and like sometimes you'll lose a friend because of, for example, like death. Something that's it's permanent, like it's not expected, and it's really heartbreaking. But other times it's the person's still alive, but like it's kind of like Sarah was saying, like they just choose to not acknowledge you anymore. And like it's heartbreaking. It rips you apart. Like it's like death by a thousand little cuts. Um, so not only in like in the short term, like you kind of like makes you reflect on the other if you have any other friendships that you at the time period, like you're like looking at your other friends and you're like, this is like I don't know, I wouldn't say you take them for granted, but like you begin to question, have self doubt in friendships. You start questioning people's intentions.
Yeah. So if the other
Um,
person didn't really care about me, then how do I know this person does?
mhm. Or like even then, like if you have someone who's starting to become really close to you, there's still that lingering feeling of like they could hurt me again, like these other people hurt me. or this other person hurt me. So then you for I would say for years to come, I remember like I was like sitting in my car with one of my friends in college, and like me and her got really, really close. And like I just remember like telling her about this friend from high school and was like sitting there and crying about it. Because it was really traumatic and just being like, I don't ever want to go through that again. And like I was saying that because because me and her were getting really close and like we are approaching like the field of like becoming like really like best friends, I guess. And like I was like, if I'm going to become really close with you, like I know it sounds like a relationship, but I get it. Um, but just want to communicate with her. Like I went through this really horrible ordeal, and like I'd rather like have some like level of separation of like knowing like I would rather us like be like not as close friends or maybe distance our like relationship a little bit than having us become really close friends and then like you just like you doing a 360 or like 180 I should say and becoming a different person and like choosing like me having to go through the whole ordeal again. Like, 'cause I'd rather have go about life and not having as close of friends, but knowing I won't ever have to like deal with that trauma ever again, versus like having really close friends and like getting completely stripped to shreds. This is not
Mm.
advice. This is just my perspective, by the way. This is just from like the impacts of
Mhm.
that relationship.
Yeah, I strongly agree. After an experience like that, the immediate response is like, there's nothing that's worth that feeling. And so if other people seem to be your friend, it's like, I don't know. I heard someone say once, uh, I don't put up walls to keep people out. I put them up to see if someone's willing to jump over them, which is not a healthy mentality. I do not encourage this, but I definitely get that. Like, there comes a point where you don't want to experience that again. And so it's worth it to make it really hard for someone to become your friend just because that way they'll never hurt you. And yeah, yeah. And also, like, I've had a few like difficult life experiences in general. And what I've experienced is whenever something really difficult happens, usually when it happens to you, it happens to your community, you know? And so when something difficult happens in your community, like a death or cancer or whatever, people react. And a lot of times that's when friendships either get worse or better. And so sometimes that'll be too much for people and it'll damage a relationship and it'll break. And it's tough because whenever I've gone through really difficult things, I've really made an effort to like be the best person I can be and make good choices and like just because I'm suffering, I don't want other people to suffer and I don't want to like damage people around me. But not everyone's capable of doing that or not everyone else is mature enough or has a life experience or whatever. And so you go through difficult things and then not only is it difficult, but they also can't handle it, so they leave. So that happens. That's part of life. It's hard and it's sad. It's doubly sad because now two bad things happened, and then it also kind of feels like betrayal because it's like I did my best to get through the situation without ruining your life, and you didn't give that to me. But the truth is, people aren't going to give that to you, and life is just hard.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like for me, at least in my experience, like after this whole like friend breakup thing, not in the immediate years to come, but like in the future. So like I became really close with like this friend in college, but she ended up moving away to go to a different school. And after that because I was really reliant on her, like I was like, okay, like I have a friend again, like we're really close and tight knit. But when she left again, I realized I didn't recover from this friend breakup. I was just masking it this entire time. I was kind of I wouldn't call it a rebound friendship because like me and her are still really good friends. But like since I had someone I was super close with, I didn't realize that like behind the wall of our friendship, I still had the emotional damage that came from our other one. So when she was gone, I had to acknowledge my own feelings. I realized that I had all these walls up still, and like I didn't know how to make friendships, and like I became the toxic friend. Um, I didn't know how to maintain friendships. I was so mistrusting of people. I didn't know how to basically I like if people see me now, they're like, "Oh, you're so extroverted, you're so bubbly, you know how to communicate well with people." Not at that time. I was so bad at making friends. Like it was like looking back at it now, it's kind of like, haha, it's funny. But at the time period, it was not. But anyways, it wasn't funny. It was really, really sad. because I didn't take the time. Like, I know a lot of pop media will say like, "Oh, just take the time to like work on yourself," um, which I don't agree with. I think for me, what helped me recover was actually going out and trying to make friends and failing over and over and over again. Um, because there's people I like would meet them at random places, like we would meet at a brewery or something like that, and like we'd become friends and we'd hang out, and like it didn't last, it didn't make it through.
Mhm.
I might still have them on social media, but like we're not like I didn't know like these people. I was like, oh, we'd become such great friends, but like I would fumble the bag, or like it's just we didn't have a good chemistry over our relationships as friends.
Mhm.
Um, and like it hurt in a sense because I'm like, oh, like I'm still lonely. I still want friends. I still want community. Um, but in the end, what really mattered was I think the going out and trying, like the kind of what Sarah was saying, like her dad's advice. So like, if you want a good life, you have to kind of like have that mentality, and then
Yeah.
you start making like little actions towards that. Um, that's what helped me. Like, it was actually for me, it wasn't like me making this mentality such. It was my sister. It was kind of encouraging me to like, hey, like you always say that there's like a girl in your French class that you really want to become friends with. Why don't you ask her to like go to an event with you? And, like,
Mm.
I did and I was this is an actual story, and, like, I actually did do that, and I was terrified. Um, but, like, she ended up coming to the dance event, and, like, we didn't obviously become the bestest of friends, but we did become friends, and it was another connecting point. Um, and it was those, like, little steps that, like, started to, like, break down, like, these toxic walls that I placed on myself, because like, me working myself was putting up these walls, and, like, that was it was basically like putting yourself in a like a I was like a vat of toxicness, and I built up like a little container to put myself in, and I was upset and angry. I'm like, why am I not making friends? I am so great.
Mhm.
um, but like slowly exposing my toxicity to air, aka other people, other opinions, and like putting myself out there quite frequently started to help me like offset this air of toxicity. Um, and really I started to grow because I just started actively seeking community instead.
Yeah. That's really good advice. So like just keep hanging out with people. Like just keep having other listening to other people's perspectives and doing other things. Like um just many small interactions. It's very good advice. But if I were listening to this when I was first wounded by friends, I would immediately turn it off because it offends me. Because I would be like, that's actually not what I'm doing. Nonetheless, it's very good advice. Um, yeah, I think I would say I had a similar experience. Like it left me pretty toxic too, and it left me super bitter. Like I don't know. I don't want to be like really self-involved and say I'm so great, but I really did make an effort to treat people well and to not contribute to any of the problems that were happening, and like to reach out to people and even to do it in a gentle way and not like MySpace was a thing at the time. I didn't like spam people and get all emotional and freaked out. I just like tried to be really gentle and reach out and do what I could, and I got nothing positive back from that. And so it basically left me feeling like even if you do the right thing, even if you genuinely care about people, people don't care and they're just all trash. And so that was pretty much my mentality. And then it left me real bitter. So I wouldn't reach out to people. And if they did reach out to me, my thought was immediately like, yeah, but they don't care either. They're just doing it because it's an organization and they're required to, or whatever bitter reason I can put in my head. And then anytime anything negative did happen, like the one time I go to a study group or whatever, and someone is blatantly rude or makes fun of me or picks me out of the crowd to be rude to, I was like, yeah, I knew that would happen, you know? And I just proved me right. And that was not helpful. But it is true that over time, eventually, you kind of have to push past that and you have to kind of accept people and just do things. Just go do something over and over and over again, lots of little things until you do experience better things and people you connect with better. But it is really hard to do. Yeah. I think my dad's advice of like choosing that you want something better, just like keeping that in your head, choosing I want something better, and then moving in that direction is pretty powerful because every day you can do one tiny good thing and choose not to do one tiny bad thing, and then you will move in a positive direction. But if you say like, I never want to improve, it's not possible anyway, then you'll just prove yourself right. Of course, that will become true because you believe it's true.
And I think this is a good time for our Bible verse of the day. So our verse of the day comes from Matthew 5:4. And it says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And honestly, when you're in the middle of a friend breakup, and if you're listening to this right now and you are in the middle of a friend breakup, or like you're seeing the starts of it, or it's just happened, this verse probably means nothing to you. You're like, I am currently in the mourning phase. Like, I am really hurt. I am really bitter. I am stung. I'm depressed. I'm sad. All the feelings of all the negative emotes, I'd say. Um, so like you're currently going through this mourning thing of like you miss a friendship that occurred. Um, but in the end, just kind of like how everyone, I know it's a cliche and everyone's like, oh, like like this is not the end. Um, as me and Sari have kind of said, explained and experienced and talked about, it's not the end. Um, it will hurt and it might impact you for years to come, essentially. But there will be people out there who, like me and Sari, we both been through a friend breakup and we both know what it's like to be on the receiving end of it. Um, so there's someone out there who will prioritize and cherish a friendship as much as you do in the same ways that you do.
Yeah.
Um, and I think by doing these little steps, like every day, like these little things will eventually lead you to that person.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way to apply it. And then um if you do believe in God too, it takes on a secondary meaning of like they will be comforted by God. I mean, I think in life good and bad things come, and so no matter what, something good will come in your life at some point because that's just how things are. But then since I do believe in God, I believe God comforts people who mourn anyway. And I have to say that horrible year of I pretty much literally had no friends. Like I have a brother, and so he and I play video games or whatever, but I had no friends for a year. It's very difficult. But that year was definitely the year I grew strongest in my faith. Like I felt so alone all the time. And then at some point, I just got mad and started like yelling at God. Like, why would you make someone be so alone? It's horrible. And um, and then at some point I realized like if I'm saying that, then I'm not alone because I'm saying it to someone. And that made me feel very comforted. And it was still like quite sad, obviously, but then I realized like what if I had nothing? If I didn't even have that, it might be hard even to live life. And I never got that far where I couldn't live life. So that was definitely the year that I learned like to lean into my faith the most and to realize like I'm not in control of my own life. God is, and then just kind of like move at God's pace and not be so bitter. So yes, I think those times they do provide a sort of comfort and they do make you a stronger person who can really be useful and like a force for good in the rest of your life.
Yeah, totally agree with Sari. Um, but going back to our little trauma dump session. So like me and Sari kind of talked about like friendships where they had a very clear and defined ending points for the most part. Like Sari's was from conflict, mine's was from a text message. But there are some times when you're going through a friendship where it's not clear and defined. It's just you guys slowly drift apart for your varying reasons. And maybe you didn't choose that. It could be your friend who chose it, or maybe you're the one who's at fault. I can definitely raise my hand and say I've been the one who's been at fault at this at times. Um, so I think though that type of breakup as well leads to an almost different kind of trauma. Because you can see it happening over time, or maybe if you're the one at fault, you don't see it happening. Um, but I think that leads to a trauma in a sense of I'm just gonna take it from the perspective of like you're the one watching your friends slowly drift apart because let's say like they are choosing a different friend group or like they you guys just don't have any similar interests anymore. Maybe they're a childhood friend and like you guys just drifted apart because you moved away, you came back together, and you realize you just don't have the same interest anymore. That it's just almost to me it was sadder in a sense. Um, just because you want to maintain the friendship, right? Like going back to the thing I keep saying 6 million times over and over again. You want to like these friendships to last forever, but like that's not always the case. Um, Similar to how relationships can ebb and flow and change, so can friendships. And like when you go into a relationship, I think a lot of people, specifically if you're getting married, you are making this commitment to one another. Saying like I'm going to choose to love you no matter what cycle or stage of life you end up in, because I'm choosing to commit my life to you. But when you go into a friendship, you're not making that same level of commitment.
Mm,
Which is sad, and I know it stings to say, but like it's just that's the truth of the matter. So let's say like you're super athletic y and like you really love doing all these things, and your friend you used to love doing all these things with you. Let's say I don't know they have a partner or they have a kid or some other life commitment, and they can't keep doing these things within you anymore, and like they're slowly drifting away because they have these other commitments. But you guys like you both want to maintain your friendship maybe, but like they have these other commitments. They're slowly starting to drift away, and you're like trying to like hold on to the strings of this relationship. Um, I think sometimes it hurts to say, but like sometimes you have to let those friendships go in a sense. Um, and it in time it hurts because you've been seeing it happen or start to fade for so long. But in the end, I think the letting go of someone who's drifting away allows for someone else to enter in. Um, and yeah, I think it once again in the short term, it's really gonna hurt. And like sometimes those friendships will drag out for way longer than you wanted to. And I would not encourage anyone of sending like the breakup text that hurts everyone involved in the process.
mm.
Um, but I think sometimes it's just good to let things play out, and then if it doesn't work, then you might also have to make the mutual decision to drift away as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that does happen. And then in my life, at least, I really appreciate clarity and truth. And so I've learned to just like do my best to see things clearly and to be honest with myself. And if I look at a relationship that maybe I used to be close with someone and like I rarely see them, when I do see them, they're not very interested in me. I just want to be honest about that and say like, what do I think that person is really experiencing? Are they really not interested in me? Because if that's the case, it hurts my feelings really bad, obviously, because I care about them. But it's better to know that and like accept that in my heart and try not to feel horrible feelings about them and then just focus on more healthy things. Because otherwise I'm saying like, oh, maybe they do still like me, maybe we are still close. But if I know that's not true, like really I know it's not true. I'm just lying to myself. I'm just making them uncomfortable because they obviously don't want to maintain it, making myself uncomfortable because I'm torn between like these two things cannot both be true. And like nobody is benefiting from that. The best thing is just like look the monster in the face and accept what it is, you know. Just look at it. It's bad, you don't like it, but acknowledge it and move on.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's one of those things that makes people people, makes humans humans. It's just one of those aspects of life that no one really likes, but it's true. Um, Kind of like how like, after after like the rain, there's sun, or something like that. Like I said, like if you do let this friendship fade away and like it's gonna hurt a lot, there is someone out there who is going to prioritize and choose you. It may take them like you years to find this person, and it's very unfortunate, but
Yeah.
I promise you that there is someone.
Yeah. My experience is, well, we said in the previous episode, like, be a friend to make a friend. If you are a kind person who is capable of making friends and treats people with respect, you will have friends. But it also could take a very long time. Like, from the time that I realized my childhood friends were no longer my friends, I was maybe 16. I didn't have solid friends again until I was 22. Like, that's quite a long time. And then from like 16 and then on to college, took me 3 years just to recover socially and be able to communicate normally again. Like I lost the ability to communicate. Didn't have great to start with, but like it got way worse. And yeah, I don't want to give like an overly positive view of like, oh, after it rains, the sun comes out, because that's true, but sometimes that's a long time later, you know?
Hmm.
At the same time, even if it's going to take 5 years, it's still the right thing to do. And it's still better to move in a positive direction than to just decide all people are horrible and you hate everybody.
Yeah, totally agree.
Um, yeah. And then kind of on that subject, like those experiences, I don't know, good or bad, whatever they are. I think any experience that's really painful is obviously bad. Like all parents ever try to protect their kids, right? Because that's what people want. They want to protect each other from pain because pain is harmful. And I don't deny it's harmful. At the same time, though, I think it does give people a sort of depth. Like the people who I know in my life who have made the most difference in my life, and like made me a good person and helped me to see clearly and love others, are people who have been through difficult things. And those things, they define you and make you like a full, developed human person. And so, just it's going to change you one way or the other. You're going to be a different person after that. And whatever image you had of friendship beforehand, that image is gone. You have to make a new one. That's just not it anymore. Like when I was a kid, I had friends who I was like my best friend. I had maybe not more than one best friend, but like, you know, more than one very intimate friend. And it's the whole thing where it's like, oh, one day when I grow up, you'll be in my wedding and like, all that silly stuff. And even as a kid, I knew that wasn't entirely true, but there was truth to it. We really did love each other. But that image that I had, it can't exist anymore. It's childish. And so you have to become someone else and just allow that change to happen to you and be the person you are now.
Yeah. Right. So I know me and Sari have talked a lot about our traumas and like some of the impacts that has in the long terms of like what your friendships look like or how you perceive friendship. But I guess one of the things we should talk about is what does recovery look like? Like how do you recover from this? It's traumatic. So I guess we both can talk a little bit about like what our steps for recovery look like. I think ours are a little bit different, or maybe quite different. Um, but I think it's an interesting thing way of approaching things. So I kind of brushed on mine a little bit of I constantly put myself back out there. I initially my recovery was actually very protective. Um, so I closed myself off quite harshly. I This was while I was in college and I like lost that like my friend who was kind of like my scapegoat friend when she left and I realized I didn't know how to make friendships again. I closed myself off. I was part of different organizations. But like I was like I said, the toxic friend. So like I didn't prioritize friendships. I took everything for granted. I realized at that point in time that I wasn't really being meaningful with any of the people who had interest in being friends with me. Um, so I had to, I don't know, like I had to humble myself. That's like a huge thing I had to do, and I had so much pride of like I'm so great. Why is no one friends with me? Um, so I had to humble myself and realize that if I wanted to make friends, I needed to put myself out there and put a level of interest in things and other people's interests as well. That's when a portion of being a friend is like you guys have mutual interest in whatever thing, but like how can you expand that interest, that friendship outside of this one category of things? Sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes you can just have a friend to be a friend in that one particular category. But friendships are like onions, and like there's so many layers to it, and like the more you guys can connect, the more deeper your friendship can grow. So I started putting myself out there and like reaching out to people, and this over and over again. It, I didn't like it because I'm very pain avoidant. Um, so like going out there and attempting to make friends and like getting rejected or like them not working out hurt and like wanted to stop doing it because I didn't like the feelings, the emotions I got from it. But I kept doing it anyways because I knew that every time I did it, I was getting one step closer towards making friends. And like even now, I moved to a different city, and like am still experiencing the same thing over again of like I have to make friends again. And like some of the people I make friends with here aren't the people who will like stay, and I don't know which ones will. And like sometimes it causes pain. So I don't really know like who actually wants friends. Like people have like their various reasons like why they do or do not want friends. And like once again, it's the same thing of like, do I want to constantly expose myself to this like hurt of like I think back to my past like traumas and I'm like, I don't want to like experience this again. And like being rejected from these friendships or like not going the way I want causes like the same emotions to arise again. But I know from my past experiences when I went through that initial phase of like I realize I'm in this area but I don't have friends and I should have friends. They've been here for so long. Being in this new area, since I've had this prior experience, I know that like I know this method for me of like going out, trying again, is what will eventually lead to me making these friends. And like that's the way I approach my recovery process.
Yeah, that sounds healthy. Well, in the end, at least. Yeah, I ended up spending a lot of time alone. Um, Partly I had pretty poor social skills when I was a kid anyway. Like, no fault to my parents or anything, they tried, but it just was not something I was good at. And then, um, eh, being like, what, if you already have bad social skills, and then having your whole like social world just kind of removed, like, I didn't know how to recover from that. I didn't even know it had damaged me for a while, but I didn't know how to recover from that. It took a really long time. And then I didn't even know it was a problem until like a year had passed. And then suddenly I was like, wow, I'm alone all the time. And it was really unhealthy. And I remember getting to the point where like when I would think about things, if a new concept happened and I think about it, I would think like, I hate my own thoughts. I know what I think about it so much in depth because I've been alone thinking about things so much that I just want to hear anyone else's opinion. And I think maybe that was healthy actually because it also like Sen said, like it humbled me a little and made me more open-minded. Like whatever whatever I'm whether I'm good or not, it doesn't matter because my opinion is not enough. My way of seeing things is not enough. I'm not enough. You have to have other people around. And so I also had to be humbled and just realize like people, I'm not like a magnet. People should just come to me and tell me, oh, you're so great. That's not how any friendships work. Um, anyway, so I had to get to that point where I wanted other people to be around, which took a while. And then after that, I had to redevelop social skills, which was extremely painful. But luckily, I did it. I happened to work at a customer service kind of job. So I had many small interactions. And eventually, I decided, like, if I'm ever going to have friends again, I'm going to have to learn to talk to people. And so I just kind of used it as an opportunity to experiment socially, say weird stuff and see if people got mad about it. And just kind of learn, like, how do people talk to each other, pay a lot of attention when people were talking to each other, and just kind of figure that out, which also took a long time. And then I went away to school, which again is hard because it's a whole new situation. I didn't know anyone who went to the same school as me, so I didn't go in having any friends. And I don't know. I guess recovery became like taking advantage of the opportunities that are around me and humbling myself to just accept whatever is around and participate as much as I can. Like roommates are kind of an amazing example because they're there. They're there every day, all the time. And like even if they're not your best friend, it is an opportunity to get to know someone else's perspective and to be involved in some sort of community. And if you have a roommate and you're not super best friends, maybe they'll have a study partner who will be really cool, or maybe they'll have some other connection. They'll bring you to a Bible study that would be cool, or whatever. So just take advantage of those connections and be open-minded and acknowledge that other people's perspectives are also valuable. And like you have to want it too. And then there's a thing where like if you have had really close friends before, the shallow interactions seem almost offensive, like in school or whatever, when people are absolutely not interested in you, but they're pretending for their own benefit, it feels like a slap in the face, like they're being mean to you. But when you're alone long enough, you realize like you just have to get over that. Get over it. Like, okay, you may feel that way, but that's probably not what they mean. And so stop being upset about everything all the time. So I guess basically my recovery was get over myself eventually. And then when I finally did kind of get over myself, like I'm not, I don't really have great social skills to know how to interact with the people or like make a new friend, but I can at least repeat what other people are doing. So when you go to a class and someone sits next to someone and says, "Oh, hey, are you in a group already?" I can do that. I saw them do that. No, I can do that. And so I would just do those things. So whatever I knew was allowed and acceptable. And then when you have roommates, have interactions with them. When you have classmates, have interactions with them. When you go to a social group, have interactions with people, and just make an effort to be doing those things. And then eventually you'll hit one or two people who you really do get along with. And with those people, you can, I'm pretty honest. And so there came a time where when I had close friends, I'd tell them, like, hey, I'm kind of socially awkward, but I think you're cool. You want to get coffee? You know, because I didn't know how to approach it, but I knew I wanted friends. So it was worth the risk. And I think humble yourself is good advice because I think people in that situation, I don't know, I don't know everyone's experience, but I do know other people who have also been lonely. And I think there is a sort of pride that comes there. Like, I don't know why exactly. I have to think about it psychologically, but it doesn't matter. There's a sort of pride that comes there, and you do sort of have to realize, like, even if you're the one who's hurt, even if someone else is the one who's wronged, it doesn't make you right, and other people still have value, and you have to get over yourself.
And kind of bouncing off of Sarah, of like she was saying, like she's really not understanding like why the level of pride comes about, and I think it's portion of it's a sense of protection.
Yeah.
Um, because if you are proud and like you feel like I feel this way and I like want these things or like want things to play out the way you want them to, it's because you're trying to protect yourself and trying to protect your emotions, how you feel, all the feelings. Um, and in a sense, you are kind of like shooting yourself in the foot when you
Mm.
do when you approach life like that because if you're unwilling to learn from other people, learn from other people's perspectives, put yourself out there, all the little tidbits of things, um, in the end, you'll just end up really lonely, and it sucks. Um,
Yeah. And that, like, pride, which I guess probably is a defense mechanism. Even the Bible says there's a time for everything, and I think maybe there's a time for that. Maybe when you're really hurt, there's a time to kind of like put a wall around and be mad at the world. And okay, maybe that's not the end of the world, but like that's not reality. It's not true. It's just how you feel. And so if you feel that way, okay, feel that way. But hope and see a future in your life where you won't always be feeling that way because that's not a good long-term solution.
yeah.
And then I think maybe this is the last point, but like all of that, like the trauma of losing friends and how you're different and people are different and it's hard to make friends again and recovery and all that. I think a huge thing that comes from that is learning about yourself. Like if you if you're lucky enough to take friends for granted, I mean, good for you. That's awesome. But if you're lucky enough to be in that place, that means you probably have just had friends. You haven't had to work that hard for it, or you're likable, or your parents had kids around, and so you were friends with them, or whatever the situation is. And that's great. Some people really are like that. But that there's a kind of shallowness where you don't really know yourself. You don't really know why do you have those friends? Why do they like you? Why do you like them? If you had to do it again, could you? Like, and not that everyone needs to have that experience, but there is something beneficial about having the experience of really looking inward and seeing who you are, who other people are, and having relationships on purpose in a meaningful way. I think knowing yourself and really being honest about your strengths and weaknesses is a healthy conclusion to come out of all that difficulty. I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I have poor social skills. and I also learned that some people just don't like me. Like usually when I get to know people, I come off kind of awkward at first, and that's whatever. And then within like 2 months, people either really like me and like get along super great, or they don't like me at all. And I rub them the wrong way. I don't know why. It's my personality, but I am okay with that. Like it's useful to know that for myself because then I can enter relationships with that expectation. And in 2 months, when someone either is like, "Wow, you're just like super honest. I love that," then I can like feel glad about that because that's something like about me. Or if they just like ghost me after 2 months, I can know like, oh, they just didn't love that, and so are all my friends. And that personal knowledge that comes from those negative experiences, it's very healthy. It helps you to have a better future.
And like from my experiences, my perspectives, like getting to know myself was kind of figure out like what are my like I am generally like a really friendly person and like I knew I don't have as much as many issues with social interactions. I did at a time period. But even now, I have to do a lot of stuff reflecting of just being like, okay, like what are Sen's interests? Like what do I like to do? And like finding once I figure out, like, what my interests are, not, like, trying to, like, go with the opinions of, like, pop culture or, like, what other people say I should like, what are genuine like, what do I like to do, then I intentionally started looking for people who like the same thing.
Mhm,
And, like, that level of self-reflection is what helped me, or, like, even, like, the acknowledgement, like, I'm I am the problem,
mhm,
and figuring out ways of, like, rectifying that, of, like, I don't know, for, like, me, it was being prayerful or, like, crying a lot because 'cause I'm upset, or, like, acknowledging the fact that I'm hurt and, like, actively choosing things to, like, not put bandages on issues, but actually actively addressing them and, like, figuring out ways to work through them. That's what helped me with my helped me, like, identify who I am as a person and, like, who I am in Christ,
mhm.
and, like, going about making friends with that context in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And that experience has also taught me to know other people better. Like not having people around and having people around and knowing myself, they've all taught me to sort of adapt. People are complicated. They have as much as you have an inner world and a life and all of your needs and interests, everybody else has that same massive inner world. And they're just like a whole pool of life that you don't know. And learning that and really understanding that, like, definitely changed the way I see people, and it's really kind of amazing because every person is a person, and I know that's obvious, but, like, when you really think about it, it's kinda beautiful. And it also taught me, like, I see things now I didn't used to see, like, there's an older woman in my life who's kind of a mentor figure, and she's really wonderful. She's so nice to everybody, and she never says anything rude, and if anyone else ever says anything rude, she always says, "Oh, I'm sure they meant well," or whatever. And that's so sweet, and it was really positive influence because it taught me to speak gently, whether I felt it or not. It taught me to just, like, say nice words, like, you don't need to attack people. But then after I had negative experiences and didn't have friends and stuff and saw people in more depth, I realized she's not just nice. It's a choice she makes every day, all the time. She sees clearly she's very smart. People do things that are mean. She doesn't fool herself and think like, "Oh, they probably didn't mean it." In her mind, she knows. I can tell she knows because she's smart. But she's so gracious. She chooses to see the best and then apply that to people. And then not only does she do that, which has to be such hard work all the time, but it becomes true because she believes it. And like I know people who are horrible, mean people, but when they go to her house, they're nice because that's just who she is. She makes the whole room nice. She is graciousness incarnate. And then like my negative experiences allowed me to see that where I didn't see it before. And then everybody all the time, like Sen is has a particular gift for whenever she needs something, she like researches, she finds the right connections. She has an ability to just find what needs to be done and communicate with whoever you need to communicate with. And it's kind of incredible. And like in the past I would have said like, oh wow, she's just good at that. But now I can see like, no, she's not just good at that. She's a person who's making choices that are good choices and like it's a world inside her head that is developing in a certain direction on purpose. And seeing people in that much depth is kind of beautiful. And I don't think you have that if you have the privilege of just always being comfortable and easy friendships that never were challenged.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's of course like to me, like, anyone's personality comes about from the individuals they surround themselves with, the people they interact with. So, like, even like the way I see the world and how I pursue it is different the way than Siri perceives the world and sees it and, like, goes about doing things, just because of the people we interact with. And, like, a lot of those interactions comes about from, like, friendships, mentorships, being roommates with someone. Those little interactions or big interactions kind of change and adjust our personality to make us who we are, and, like, also changes the way we pursue friendship as well.
Mhm,
Um, so, with all that being said, I think our biggest takeaway is that essentially there is life after death. Um, which sounds like that was completely out of nowhere, but, like, to put it in a little bit more context, there is life, aka there are friends after death, aka a friend relationship ending. It's at the time period, it will seem like it's over and, like, everyone hates you.
mhm,
Um, but take it from me, take it from Sari, it's not completely over, though it feels like it. And maybe that friendship is completely over, like, it and it might define some aspects of the way you pursue friendships in the future, but, like, it's not over completely. Like, every friendship you ever make in the future will not be defined by this one friendship.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good conclusion. Yeah, there is life after death. There is a sort of small death in that experience. Every relationship you have, that's who you are. So if that gets destroyed, a part of you is dead, and that's really reality. But a part of you may die, but you're still there, and potential is still there, and hopefully you will recover and have more friendships. Yeah, I think that's a very good conclusion. There's life after death.
All right. So if you enjoyed listening to our podcast episode, make sure to like, subscribe, follow. I don't really know which platform thing we're using, so whatever the platform thing instructs you to do. And thank you for listening to Lonely People, a Friendship podcast. Once again, I am Sen.
Right, I'm sorry.